Hello and welcome to Global News Today, bringing you exclusive interviews with leading experts every weekday here on Arabiya English. I'm Burges Watson. Coming up today, we have our eye very firmly fixed on Gaza. We'll be speaking to the former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Olmert, a vocal critic of the current Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. We'll be asking him, amongst other things, what Israel's objectives currently are in Gaza. Hello and welcome to the programme. Straight to Gaza, where the Israeli Defense Ministry has given the green light for a takeover of Gaza City and an expanded offensive. Well, overnight, Israeli strikes hammered central Gaza and the city's outskirts. Residents say the bombardment was relentless and deadly. Well, this comes as international concerns mount about the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, with Israel saying the operation is targeting the Hamas tunnel network. Well, Israel's Gaza City takeover plan involves deploying 60,000 reservists and extending service for 20,000 others. That's according to Israel. Well, the troop presence is already visible on the ground. And earlier on today, the military released a video showing what it says is troop activity in Khan Yunis, which is in southern Gaza, with soldiers seen shooting from both the air and the ground. A little earlier on, the US ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, spoke to Arabiya English. In an exclusive interview, he said that the creation of a Palestinian state is not a priority for the Trump administration. Well, that marks a shift from decades of US policy, which traditionally backed a two-state solution. Let's take a listen.
I'm not seeing anyone, certainly haven't heard the president say that this is one of the most important things we've got to look for. I think he wants to see peace happen here. There are certain things that can be done that would be helpful toward peace. Unfortunately, every time we think we're working toward them and getting there, we see actions by the Europeans or the Palestinian Authority that completely disrupt it. And a good example is the Palestinian Authority has pushed for the unilateral recognition. It's had a backfiring effect. They continue to pay terrorist families for acts of terror against Israelis. That's counterproductive. It's very, very destructive toward resolving anything. By them going around the Oslo Agreement, by the fact that there was a Palestinian state, it was Gaza. It was a 100% Palestinian state. People see how that turned out. That did not exactly endear folks looking at it to say, yeah, that ought to work out really, really well.
Well, let's get more. We can speak now to Ehud Olmert, who is the former Prime Minister of Israel, who served from 2006 to 2009. Mr. Olmert, thank you very much indeed for joining us here on Arabiya English. We've had 22 months of violence. 66,000 plus people have been killed in Gaza. What's your understanding of what Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is trying to achieve? Do you think he has any clear objectives?
I'm not certain that I can give you a very reliable representation of what Netanyahu wants. I can only judge it by what I see. And I think that the policy which has been claimed by the government is that they think that they need to conquer all of Gaza, which means that they don't think that after 22 months of fighting, Hamas has been destroyed completely and they want to carry on. Question is whether this is a realistic objective that can be achieved and what is the cost of this operation. And there is a huge opposition to this policy by the government. Most of the Israelis believe that the war should stop now, right away, and that there is not anything that can be achieved which is worth the cost of continuing the fighting, deporting the people, losing Israeli soldiers, perhaps losing also the hostages, and killing many non-involved Palestinians. All this is not worth what can be achieved, and therefore it should stop right away.
And why do you think Prime Minister Netanyahu won't stop now?
There can be many different objectives that he may think he can achieve, perhaps continuing the war, perhaps threatening the Hamas, as he says, that they are squeezed and that they may surrender altogether. We don't take it seriously.
A lot of people say Netanyahu is just trying to survive and stay in the political arena and stay out of prison. Do you agree with those, many of them in Israel, who said that when the fighting stops, Netanyahu's time is up?
Netanyahu's time is up already, a long time ago. And there are many Israelis that argue that this is a personally motivated move by the prime minister, trying to save his government, perhaps to prevent the withdrawal of the participants of the cabinet, the messianic groups. We threaten that if the war will stop now, they will break down the government. So there can be many good interpretations. There is not one good excuse that can justify continuing the war. All the rest is a speculation which may be very reliable. But, I don't want to add to what is already said by so many Israelis.
The creation of the Palestinian state is not a priority for the Trump administration. That's what the US ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, told my colleague here on Arabiya English today. I wonder what you make of that. And I also like to ask you whether you think President Trump can do something to stop this war.
President Trump certainly can stop the war if he wants to do it. And apparently, as of this minute, it doesn't seem so. I don't know. I don't want to judge the statements made by the ambassador in Israel. He's known to have a very extreme right-wing position. I'm not certain that these are necessarily representatives of the policy of Trump. I heard many things coming from Trump on different occasions. I personally think that Trump can stop the war if he wants to do it, because he's perhaps the only person in the world that has enough power to force the Israeli prime minister to end it. And I think that sooner or later he will have to reach that inevitable conclusion that if he wants to end the war, if he wants to save lives of innocent people from all sides, from the Israeli side, the hostages, obviously, and also Palestinians, there is not a better course of action than just ending the war now, returning all the hostages, releasing Palestinian prisoners as part of the agreement, and introducing an interim security force that will be made up of Palestinians, of soldiers from moderate Arab countries, Egypt, Jordan, the Emirates, Saudis, that will take over the actual control over Gaza that will prevent Hamas from reviving itself into any dominant position. This is what needs to be done. I think it is on the cards. It can take place. I think that Hamas is not in favor of any partial agreement, but if there will be a deal that the war is stopped completely and all the hostages are returned, this is something that can be achieved. I think that this is something that the Americans can force the two sides to accept. And it has to be done, and the sooner the better.
So do you think it's correct to say that Prime Minister Netanyahu acts with the full backing of President Trump?
It's open for interpretation. Maybe, as it appears to be right now, maybe this is true. But based on the experience that we have with President Trump, it can change, and it can change rapidly, and I hope it will change rapidly, because I don't think that anything other than this will bring forth anything that will be valuable and that will be positive in terms of the interest of everyone, the Israelis, the Palestinians, the international community, and the American interest. It has to be stopped, period.
We're receiving reports that children are continuing to die of malnutrition in Gaza. The International Committee of the Red Cross has described the situation as catastrophic for both Palestinian civilians and the Israeli hostages who remain in captivity there. How would you characterize what Israel is doing in Gaza?
Again, one has to be familiar with all the specific details. Perhaps the UN or the Red Cross know more details than I know. Definitely, I think, without being familiar with all the specifics, it certainly is a very difficult situation for many Palestinians that may suffer from the lack of humanitarian supplies or enough humanitarian supplies, although Israel is making some efforts now, but perhaps it's not sufficient. And therefore, it's a very painful situation for all of them and for all of us. And this is something that needs to be changed rapidly, because there is not any reason to endanger risk the lives of non-involved people, certainly children, but not only children in Gaza, and also the possible loss of the hostages, which are still alive. 20 of them are still alive, and we want them back rapidly as soon as we can.
Would you characterize it as a genocide?
No, it's not a genocide. We don't have to stretch it beyond reasonable limits. It's not genocide. It's totally unacceptable when, all the former commanders of the Israeli army, I'm not talking just about the rank and files in the street, okay, but I'm talking about the most senior generals, the warriors of Israel for generations, all the commanders of the Israeli army, heads of the Mossad, heads of the security services, when all of them continuously argue that there is not any reasonable objective that is worth continuing and expanding this military operation, and that nothing can be achieved which is worth the price paid by Israeli soldiers, by hostages, by Palestinians. This is, by definition, a crime. This is not genocide, and there is not a policy of genocide by Israel. But the fact that there is not a policy of genocide doesn't mean that it is not a criminal by nature.
There are obviously people around the world who are horrified by what's happening in Gaza. You've been outspoken. You've used strong language. You've been sharply critical of Prime Minister Netanyahu. You've called the war in Gaza a political war. You've accused some in the Israeli leadership of war crimes. In the Israeli newspaper Haaretz, you described this as a war of annihilation in Gaza. What kind of a reception do your comments get from a domestic Israeli audience?
Well, as you know, 70% of the Israelis are in favor of ending the war immediately now. So I guess that substantially they have a similar opinion than mine. But of course, I'm criticized by many, and I'm criticized by all the supporters of the cabinet and the prime minister, and they are waging a very expensive and comprehensive battle against me in all the networks. But I have to say what I see and what I understand, what I think is the right thing for the state of Israel. I'm not less a patriot of the state of Israel than any of these guys. When I had to fight against terrorists and criminals and murderers, I did it without any hesitations. But there is a time when you have to say up to here. There is no more reason to do it. When we started the counteroffensive of Israel in October of 2023, it was unavoidable and inevitable and absolutely justified. We had to reach out for the murderers and the killers of Hamas. But as you say, and I'm not certain that these are the exact figures, 66 thousands killed in Gaza, slightly less or slightly more, doesn't make a big difference. This is an exorbitant number of victims. Many of them were Hamas fighters, and they had to be punished, and and they deserved it. But there are so many thousands which were not. And I think that the time has come where you have to look at it and ask yourself, okay, we have destroyed 70% of the buildings and the constructions in Gaza, which is almost completely destroyed. We have eliminated the leaders of Hamas, Yahya Sinwar, Mohammed Deif, Muhammad Sinwar, Ismail Haniyeh, all of the high commanders and the middle-level commanders of Hamas. Thousands of them were killed. They were almost completely eradicated. To argue today, after 22 months, that there is an imminent need to continue to expand the military operation because this is a security existential interest of the state of Israel is grossly blown out of any proportion. And again, as I said, all the military experts, all the former generals of Israel, 70% of the population, perhaps more, think that this is not needed, this is not necessary. We have achieved what we can achieve by a military operation. We have caused the huge damage to Gaza, unprecedented in modern history. There are so many thousands of people killed. There were so many victims on our side as well. And we still have the hostages we want to save. Enough is enough. It has to end. Nothing can justify it. And we have to battle against it. And that's what I'm trying to do everywhere I can, because I think that it's very important that everyone that looks at us now in every corner of the world should know that the voices that come from Israel are not only those of Ben-Gvir and Smotrich and Netanyahu, but of millions of Israelis that think like I do and that want the war to end and that want to establish a process that will bring forth perhaps a dialogue that will end these hostilities for a long time.
Okay, well, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed for your time, sir. Ehud Olmert, the former Prime Minister of Israel. Thank you for your time. Well, let's get more on this. We can speak now to Ambassador Adel Atiyeh, who is the Director of European Affairs Department, Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the State of Palestine. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time to speak to us, Ambassador. We're being told that hundreds of thousands of Palestinians are now leaving Gaza City. They're heading to southern Gaza. What's your understanding of the situation today in the enclave?
It seems that Israel and the Prime Minister Netanyahu continues his war of genocide and his war of ethnic cleansing, despite in all efforts and attempts to reach a ceasefire. And the latest news came from Qatar and from Egypt that Hamas agreed on a ceasefire proposition. But the absence of a clear answer from Netanyahu is the proof that this war is not only about dismantling military infrastructures in Gaza, but it is about the destruction of the three components of a Palestinian state: the demography, the geography, and the Palestinian Authority. On geography, there are calls to reoccupy Gaza and to extend, to empower settlement expansion in the West Bank in order to undermine the geographic basis of the Palestinian state. In demography, well, the ethnic cleansing, all those statements coming from Netanyahu, Smotrich, and Ben-Gvir are obvious that the intention is to kick out Palestinians from their land in Gaza. And on the Palestinian Authority, there is a war of financial starvation. Israel is stealing our money, and it put the Palestinian Authority in a difficult situation in order to undermine our capacity to deliver services to our people. So it is obvious today that Mr. Netanyahu is continuing his war of genocide, and he's not listening to the international community repeated appeals to stop this madness.
There was a rare protest in Gaza City today, people protesting against the war, some people out on the streets with banners, with flags. I mean, what would be your description of the morale amongst people in Gaza City right now?
I can't imagine how do people still resisting, still after 2 years of permanent bombardment. Israel dropped over Gaza more than 120,000 tons of bombs. This is 7 times the Hiroshima nuclear bomb. No water, no food, no electricity. and those were the statements of the previous Israeli defense minister, and the repeated declaration that Israel will starve people in Gaza. It is hard to imagine how do people continue to live in such conditions. Just imagine in the summertime with no electricity, with no heat, with no water, with no medicine, with no hospitals to treat those whom are wounded, the sick people. So I really can't imagine. It's hard. It broke the hearts to imagine how do people, and I understand there are demonstrations, there are people fed up of this war, and they want this genocide, this massacre to stop as soon as possible. But again, the one who is not listening to all those ideas for a ceasefire is obviously Netanyahu, because he wants this war to continue in order not to be held accountable for his internal corruption cases, and he wants to continue this war in order to not be held accountable for the violations of international law, and he wants to destroy the prospect of a two-state solution through his war.
Interestingly, I mean, there's been condemnation from right across the world for what Israel has been doing in Gaza, a lot of the condemnation coming from allies, some of the condemnation coming from Israel itself. But the US ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, spoke to my colleague here on Arabiya English earlier on today. And his words were, stop putting so much pressure on how Israel is defending itself against Hamas, and start putting pressure, he said, on radical military actions that were intended to kill Jewish people. I mean, he seems to be saying that the world should leave Israel to its own devices and sort of mind its own business. Do you think that reflects US policy, or do you think that's just his opinion?
Well, I think that he should listen to many Israeli military officials saying that this is not a war of self-defense, this is a war of revenge. And he should also listen to Mr. Netanyahu when Mr. Netanyahu is calling to establish the greater Israel. And he should listen to Smotrich when Smotrich is saying that we should flatten Gaza and kick out all Palestinians from their land. And I would ask him, what does he say about what Israel is doing in the West Bank? In the West Bank, there is no Hamas, but in the West Bank, there is a policy of massive destruction, there is a policy of ethnic cleansing, there is a policy of settlement expansion, which is an attempt to kill the prospect of a two-state solution. And therefore, I come to my previous statement saying this war has other objectives than dismantling the military infrastructure on Hamas. It has the objective to kill the prospect of a two-state solution. And this is the reality. And this is the fact that Americans should understand and should recognize.
Yeah, the ambassador, Mike Huckabee, said the creation of a Palestinian state is not a priority for the Trump administration. That's what he told my colleague here on Arabiya English earlier today. What do you make of that? And do you think President Trump, do you agree with those who say President Trump is the one person on earth who can end this conflict?
The United States, it is largely agreed that the United States has a leverage on Israel, and they could exercise pressure on Netanyahu to stop this war. But it is also clear that there is a consensus among the international community that peace and stability and security for Israel needs an independent state of Palestine. To put an end to this cycle of violence, we need to create a Palestinian state to allow the Palestinians to exercise their right to self-determination. So to all those who really care about Israel, who really care about the security of the Israelis, they should support the creation of an independent state of Palestine. France and other major powers in the West are on the way to recognize the state of Palestine, because they came to this conclusion. They came to the important conclusion that Netanyahu's intentions is to destroy the prospect of the peace state, a permanent peace settlement, including the creation of an independent state. And the only way to guarantee peace and security in the region is to create an independent state of Palestine. And we really hope that the United States will share those analyses and will join other international community actors to put an end to this war, to put an end to this suffering, and also to think seriously about recognizing an independent state of Palestine.
And yet, the US Ambassador Mike Huckabee is saying this is not a priority for the Trump administration. What is your message as a Palestinian diplomat? What's your appeal to President Trump? What would you like to say to him?
To make the right decision, because this conflict has been going for 77 years. It is 58 years since 1967. We've started negotiating with Israel in 1993, so it is 32 years that we've been negotiating with Israel, and Israel has been using the peace negotiations to empower the occupation and to join the international consensus, again, that peace and stability in the Middle East passes only by the creation of an independent state of Palestine. And to those, to President Trump and others who care really about the security of Israel, the security of the Israeli people, they should accept the idea that the security of the Palestinian people also should be guaranteed.
We've heard from the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres renewing his calls for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. I mean, it doesn't seem like the Israelis are listening, does it? Why do you think Israel takes so little notice of what UN officials, even the UN Secretary General, have to say?
Well, because Israel has been acting during the past decades without being held accountable, total impunity. But the world is changing. Now, even the closest ally to Israel, let me mention here Germany, took the decision to suspend all armed trades with Israel. The EU has, for the first time in its history, opened a discussion about the EU-Israel Association Agreement. Some member states, some EU member states, imposed sanctions on settlers terrorists and on settlers terrorist movements. And they also imposed sanctions against the extremist minister in this government. So the world is changing now, and the world is not dealing, at least the Western world or Europe, is not going to continue dealing with Israel according to the traditional approach. The traditional approach totally failed to hold Israel accountable. So it is changing again because the world came to the conclusion that Israel's objective is to destroy the prospect of a two-state solution, and the security and the stability in the Middle East and in Europe needs an independent state of Palestine and to put an end to the military occupation.
As a Palestinian diplomat, what sort of activities are you engaged in on a daily basis to try to draw attention to the plight of Palestinians, particularly in Gaza, but as you say, also in the West Bank? And what sort of activities are you engaged in to communicate and engage with other leaders to try to do your part to put a stop to this?
Well, this is at the heart of our work as diplomats, to reach out to other partners, to explain to them the reality on the ground, to frame the Israeli policies, whether it is in Gaza or in the West Bank, and to put it in a political frame that it is not only a coincidence. Those are not isolated events. Settlement expansion, settlement construction, ethnic cleansing, targeting the Palestinian geography is obviously an Israeli policy. Those are not accidents, and urging the world to uphold its moral, political obligation. Because if we fail Gaza, it is the responsibility of the entire humanity. International law is in danger because of the repeated violations of Israel, of its obligation and international law, and the credibility of the international community, of the United Nations also. Here is a question about the credibility of international law. If Israel continues to enjoy immunity and to violate international law, I think this harms, this is a global harm, a global challenge. And we try to explain to our partners that we should stand together. This is a global challenge that needs a global solution. And we are all partners in addressing this important challenge.
And Ambassador Atiyah, what would you like to see Arab nations doing and saying to try to support the cause of the Palestinian people?
Well, we have a support at all levels among our other brothers and neighbors. And I think that if I refer to the New York Peace Conference on the implementation of the two-state solution, which is a cornerstone on the implementation, on the creation of independent states, well, this is thanks to the support of our Arab brothers. This is very much appreciated, the Saudi Arabia efforts and France efforts in this regard, because this conference is a turning point where there is a paradigm change here. We're not anymore talking about revival the peace process, but we shift to the situation where we are talking about the implementation of the two-state solution. And this conference came with concrete tools, concrete propositions to implement the two-state solution. And the Arab world is our strategic depth, which comes always to support, which comes always to provide political, financial support to the Palestinian people. And without this support, I think that the Palestinian cause would have been in a very complicated situation.
Okay, well, I'm being told we're out of time. Thank you very much indeed for speaking to us. Ambassador Adel Atiyah, thank you very much indeed for your time, sir. Well, let's get more now. We can speak to Brigadier General Yossi Kupavasa, who is the former IDF Chief, Military Intelligence Research Division. He joins us now from Tel Aviv. Thank you very much indeed for speaking to us, Brigadier General. Always a pleasure talking to you. I want to start by asking you, what is your understanding of Israel's military objectives in Gaza's largest city?
Well, I think that we are, first of all, thank you for having me. And by the way, I'm also the head of the Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security. That's what I do today. Anyhow, regarding our goals in Gaza City, they are very clear and they were well defined by the government. It is to remove Hamas from power in Gaza and to release the hostages and make sure that Gaza will not be in the future a base for launching terror attacks against Israel. That's what we are trying to accomplish ever since we started this campaign.
How long would it take to seize all of Gaza City, do you think?
Well, it depends how you do that. It can be very short, but this is going to cause a lot of damage both to Gaza and to the soldiers that are going to do that. So what we prefer to do is to do it a little bit slower and avoid damage to Gazans and to our soldiers. What we need to do is, first of all, make sure that the population leaves Gaza City so that they are not going to be in harm's way. And then we shall start operating and knowing that the only people left in the city are the terrorists, and that will make it easier for us to operate over there. Altogether, I think it's going to take several weeks, maybe a couple of months.
I mean, what do you think is the rationale for calling up 60,000 reservists? What do you read into that?
We need to have a lot of force once we enter Gaza. And for that, we need the reservists. The standing army of Israel is a very small one. And we build mainly on reservists in order to have enough power to fight a war. And that's why from time to time we call them up. And that's what we do now. 60,000 additional reservists will make it altogether 130,000 reservists that are going to be in duty. And that would enable us to take control of most of the territory of the Gaza City once we finish evacuating the civilian population within a relatively short period of time.
And with regards to the civilian population, there's been reported a six-fold increase in the number of children suffering from malnutrition in Gaza City. That's since the month of March. A lot of people are going to be simply too weak to move. They've been displaced so many times. I mean, what sorts of things can be done by the IDF to do, as you say, to ensure they're not placed in harm's way?
Well, we are preparing a place for them to be safe and relatively safe. It's Gaza after all, but they're going to be relatively safer in these areas that we prepare. We are working on helping them to get medical treatment if they need so. And I think that they are definitely going to be safer in those areas in the southern part of Gaza. It's not far away from Gaza City, not that far, and but out of Gaza City itself. And they're going to be much safer than they are today, even before the operation starts, because once they are in Gaza City, the humanitarian aid that's going to Gaza City is confiscated and looted by the Hamas mainly and by all kinds of criminal gangs, and doesn't reach in full the population itself. So once they leave and move to the safer areas, they're going to be provided with the aid that was going to be delivered to them by Israel and the organizations that operate together with Israel. And that's going to be much better for them.
Yes, but we've never quite understood, anyone outside Israel, it seems, doesn't really understand this argument that because Hamas might steal some aid and gangs might steal some other aid, that means no aid should be sent to Gaza and the result will be guaranteed, i.e. people get malnutrition and are on the brink of starvation. I mean, that argument really doesn't...
A lot of aid, no, you got it wrong. A lot of aid is getting to Gaza City.
Nothing like enough.
A lot of aid. No, more than enough. But according to the UN...
How do you explain a six-fold increase in the number of children malnourished since the month of March?
First of all, let's keep in mind that this data is coming from Hamas.
No, it's coming from the United Nations. It's coming from UNRWA.
But they take it from Hamas. The United Nations doesn't have their own...
So what data have you got for me? Have you got some better data?
I don't have I don't know. Just keep in mind that this is Hamas information. Secondly, according to UN information, then this is UN information, not Hamas information, 89% of the aid coming into Gaza is looted by either Hamas or by the criminal gangs. 89%. So what reaches the population is only 10% of the
It's better than nothing.
That's coming in.
It's better than nothing, better than a blockade, not letting any aid in at all.
Definitely it's better than something. We allow the 100% get there. The 100% moves through our troops and get to Gaza. Once it gets there, the Hamas loots part of it and the criminal gangs loots the rest of it, and only 10% gets to the population. That's the situation in Gaza.
But anyway, the aid isn't yours. The aid,
we're calling on the population, leave Gaza.
The aid is mostly...
Go to a place where 100% of the population of the aid is going to reach you. You're going to be much better off.
The aid is donated by the international community. It's not Israel's to withhold. So why not allow that aid in? So at least the people don't starve.
Withhold it. We don't withhold the aid.
But there are trucks stuck on the border. Why?
Because the UN organizations refuse to take it and distribute it. By the way, this is not the case anymore. It was the case until recently. But it was because the UN agencies refused to take the aid. They complained about all kinds of conditions and so on and so forth, and they were worried about their safety and security once they enter Gaza. And that's why they refused to take the aid and move it into its target. And from an Israeli point of view, we allow enough aid coming in as well. We allow the airdrops of additional aid. There's no shortage of food in Gaza.
So why? I don't understand.
Distribution.
I don't understand. Do you not get the same television pictures that the rest of the world gets, where we see children? I mean, I've seen only today an emaciated child of perhaps 1 or 2 years of age, impossible to tell from the state that child is in. Why are children dying of starvation? And why is Israel not making sure that doesn't happen?
Of starvation. Most of the pictures that you look at are, I don't know the specific pictures that you're talking about, but most of the pictures are looking at people, young people suffering from all kinds of other diseases, and they have all kinds of situations and conditions. And then nobody checks that, we have already shown that the 12 pictures that were used in order to prove that there is starvation in Gaza were all of children that were suffering other problems and they were treated and so on and so forth.
So you're denying that there's any starvation, because this is on the record.
No, I'm not.
You're denying there is starvation.
I'm not denying that there is starvation. First of all, there's no starvation. There is hunger. There's no starvation. Starvation means that somebody intentionally tries to prevent somebody food. That's not happening. We allow the food in. But definitely there's no starvation on behalf of Israel. We allow the more than necessary amounts of food to come in. There's a problem with the distribution, and the problem with distribution of the aid causes the problems of hunger.
There's a huge problem. There's a huge problem of distribution of the aid, which is that the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation doesn't know what it's doing.
It's caused by the criminal gangs and by Hamas that loots the food.
No, I think the problem is the GHF, isn't it? Isn't it the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation that is supposed to be supervising the distribution of food aid in Gaza? And yet children are shot at whilst trying to get food.
Sorry, but you got it wrong again. The GHF is distributing aid in 4 centers, mainly in southern Gaza and the central area of Gaza. The plan is to have it broadened and to allow them to do that in 16 more centers, altogether 20 centers. And this is going to be possible once the population is going to leave Gaza City, because the GHF cannot work in Gaza City. They're not allowed in by the Hamas. So Hamas doesn't want the organization that doesn't work with him to be involved in distributing the food. They are trying to prevent people from going to the centers of GHF in order to get their food and meals. That's the truth of the matter. And that's causes a lot of problems. We want GHF to be able to disseminate food to many more Gazans. And that's why we also ask the Gazans to leave Gaza City and move to places where GHF can provide them with food. That's what's going on. But we have to remember that the wider context of that. This is a debate, discussion that should be held, and it's important for everybody to realize what's going on in Gaza with food distribution. That's very important. But we have to remember that the war is not fought because there is a problem of food distribution. The war is fought because there is a need to remove Hamas from power, because there is a need to make sure that everybody realizes that the 7th of October was a mistake, and that nobody should be able or even dream of repeating the 7th of October. That's what the war is all about. And with all the discussion about the food distribution, we lose track of the main problem, which is Hamas control of Gaza. That's what we have to deal with.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed for your time, Brigadier General Yossi Kupavasa. Thanks for your time. Well, that is all we have time for on Global News today. Thank you very much indeed for watching. Be sure to join us again tomorrow for a look back at some of the best moments of the week. Until then, bye-bye.